Hello and welcome. My name is Brian Oles, president and founder here at Black Speakers Network, and we are thrilled to have you join us for the Black Mental Health Speaker Series. As we dive into our theme, progressing from stigmas to solutions, we encourage you to contribute to the dialogue by participating in the chat. Now, as you know, May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and this is a time to spotlight the importance of mental health, especially within the Black community. As we come together for these enlightening discussions, we hope to raise awareness, foster understanding, and contribute to the journey of emotional wellness for us all. This speaker series is broken into 6 parts, divided into 3 sessions, airing each day. So no matter what part you're joining us for, we encourage you to go ahead and watch the entire series. You definitely don't want to leave anything on the table. The speakers you're about to hear from are leading and emerging experts as well as advocates in the mental health and wellness space. Each speaker is also a proud member of Black Speakers Network. We will be talking about very important issues today. So before we begin, I want to ask you to go ahead and spread the word to your family, friends, people in your community, networks, companies that should be a part of this conversation. You can click the share button or simply just share the link and invite folks into the conversation. A few final notes before we get started. Number one, the speaker series is just one of hundreds of speaking opportunities shared across the Black Speakers Network ecosystem. So if you are a current or aspiring speaker looking for your next stage, I want to invite you to learn more. You can head over to blackspeakersnetwork.com/join. And on the other hand, if you are a meeting planner, conference or event organizer, or a host, and you're looking for the perfect speaker for your next event, I would love to connect with you as well. You can browse, find our online speakers directory, or submit a speaker request for your next event by using the links in the description for this video. Now, that out the way, let's go ahead and get kicked off. Thank you so much again for being here and joining us on this journey, and welcome to the Black Mental Health Speaker Series. Let's go.
Hey, how you doing? My name is Shirkydra Roberts, and I am the CEO and founder of Impact Inspire Motivate Enterprises. I'm also a military active duty member. I have been in the Navy for 14 years and served as an engineering officer. When I'm not in uniform, I'm a motivational speaker, your life and business coach, transformation coach. I'm the podcaster and a Me Too advocate, a 3-time author, and I have truly spent years mastering the behaviors that come with combining spiritual wealth and mental wealth so we can truly serve God with our whole hearts, minds, and our souls. A lot of times we forget one of those, and it's the mind work, it's the inner work, it's what it takes to get all of the coping mechanisms, the toxic behaviors, getting our minds to align with where we want to be in the spirit, and not just allowing that posture of sitting and waiting on God and actually getting out there and going from being influence to becoming an impact. And truly, I'll give you a little background about me. I'm a victim of child sexual abuse from the age of about 5 to 14 years old. When I was in high school, I started inflicting pain on myself as a cutter to kind of cope with the pain that I was dealing with on the inside. And eventually that pain turned into other things and other behaviors that cost me scholarships for playing sports. I was an athlete. I was top 10% of my class. Grades went down. Just trauma started to create a domino effect in my life. At 18, it was a man in an all-white suit. He asked me to sign up for the Navy, and I left home at 18, and I never turned back, and I've been serving since. I made some decisions early in my career, and I did not understand where they came from. I had a fear of being in the dark. I had paranoia of being by myself. I was dealing with the approval addiction, the acceptance addiction. Like, who loves me? And if they do love me, what does that even look like? Because so much was taken from me as a child that I didn't know how to navigate as an adult. I had so much going on in my mind, my story, my emotions, my feelings. They were all balled up inside of me. Like, I was waiting. I was a ticking bomb, y'all, waiting to explode. And eventually I got to that explosion along my career. As a leader, I exploded. As a mentor, I exploded. As a woman of faith, I exploded. Because although I was praying, although I was seeking out God, although I was doing these things, I was influenced by the word of God, but I wasn't making an impact by the word of God. And that's what I want to talk about today is how do we go from influence to impact and aligning ourselves with not just wanting to change inwardly, but allowing that to come outwardly and making an impact and a change in this world that we live in. I truly use my story not to be the victim, not to, be the sob story of the group. I truly use my story to impact other people and to make sure that I don't just want to influence you to be a great person. I don't just want to influence you to find your purpose. I don't just want to influence you to heal from your pain. I want you to use your story to reach your group, your audience, the people that are waiting for you to find their hope. The people that are waiting for you to find their change, their shift, their shifting of their mindset and their perspective so they can go out and do great things in the world. It's your voice and it's your story. And so I've been able to take how I am as a woman of faith and understanding the expectations from God and combine that with what I've learned through the process of therapy, the process of psychotherapy, the process of learning how to retrain my brain from the triggers that I learned from trauma as a young girl. Like, we have to go back. And it's not about just finding the root to the tree. We're finding the seed. We're finding the planters of the seeds, and we're facing our stories head on so that we can do the inner work within ourselves. So whatever fruit that we produce is fruit that is going to harvest. It is fruit that is going to cause change. It is fruit that's going to cause a movement. And that's what we want to do with our purpose, with our stories. How do we not just sit in the pew and hear the word of God? Because sometimes I learned that just hearing and not doing, it's not going to produce a living thing. It's not going to produce anything. And I was that person who grew up in the church as well. And I felt that just fast, just pray, just fast, just pray. But there's some execution in there. There's some trust that has to happen. God works through people. And I had to learn that for myself as a woman of faith, that God works through people. And I started wanting to know more about myself, how to get better, how to change. I went to therapy. I went to counseling. I've seen a psychologist. I've tried everything so that I can learn more about myself and how to become better as an individual, as a speaker, as a leader, as a mentor. How can we coach? How can we build if we're not perfecting our crafts? And the only way to perfect what you're doing is to perfect yourself, the person that's doing it, right? And so I've categorized my process into 4 steps. I want you to write this down. I want you to own the story. I want you to face the story. I want you to heal from the story and then go use the story. Again, we got to own it. Yes, I know that it happened to me. Yes, I know that I had no part in it. It's not my fault. I don't have to apologize. I don't have to say sorry. Then I'm going to face it. Whatever that means, whether that's forgiveness, whether that's speaking up and speaking out, whether that's confronting the person or the people that were involved, or even confronting myself. And then I'm going to choose to heal. What processes I'm going to go through to make sure that all the negative things that came with my trauma, that came with my experience, I am washed free and clean of that thing, so that when I speak on it, it's not tears of pain. It's not tears of bringing up the past, but I'm actually moving as a healed individual. And last, how am I going to use what I went through and what I've been through for the betterment of the world? Me, I use my story to give people hope, to give people love, to give people that experience that says you can go from pain to purpose. You can also go from influence to impact. Well, how are you going to use your story? How are you going to use what you built, who you built, everything that came out of what you went through, not just for you, but for the world? We don't have to just influence people. People will be influenced for a moment, but they can be impacted for the rest of their life. And so I ask you today, what are you doing with your story? What are you doing when it comes to taking out the negative perspective of things you went through and turning them into a positive? Because I know when I feel like I'm weak, I go back to my story and I find that strong little girl that kept pushing. When I need courage, I go back to that teenager that needed it. When I need a boost and a pick me up, I don't just use the scripture, I apply it, and I understand that I may not understand everything, but my life still has purpose. Sometimes we use our story as a reference. It does not always have to be a dark place. And so I ask you before I close on this topic is, how are you going to use your story to make an impact around the world? I look forward to hearing from you. My name is Shirkydra Roberts on all social media platforms. Please reach out if you have questions, if you have assistance, if there's anything I can do to push you into the right direction or help you refine your story and how to use it as an impact in this world. You can reach out to me on any social media platform. My website is www.sriame.com. I look forward to always collaborating, and so that we can attack this world as a forefront. It takes multiple of us to do it. Don't worry about who's already doing it. Your audience needs you to do it, so let's get it done, okay?
Hello, my name is Charles Jackson. I'm a certified diversity, equity, and inclusion practitioner, and I'm here today to talk about the interconnection of race and mental health. I'd like to say it's all in the genes. Have you ever thought about how stories are passed down through your family history, maybe a family heirloom, even real estate? What if I told you that trauma can also be passed down, not only from parent to child, but also to the community that we live in? And it's not just on an individual level, but even down to our literal genes can change because of the trauma that's experienced within the culture that we live in. So there is a conceptual model of historical trauma that talks about how our trauma that happened in our community over 400 years ago also affects us to this day. So it states up here that segregation and displacement is a mass trauma experience. And that mass trauma experience, we know the history. Africans were taken from their homeland, brought to this country of the United States, and forced into slavery. But what we don't think about are the after effects of what does that mean in a physical response? What does it mean in a psychological response? What does that mean in a social response when it comes to the descendants of enslaved people? So it's literally in the genes. Our psychological experiences affect our mental health, our daily mental health. And this intergenerational transmission is physiological, it's genetic, it changes our environment, it changes our psychosocial. It literally is ingrained in every part of us. And it's not only just seen in Black communities, but also other communities that have experienced mass trauma as well, whether it was through violence, whether it's through economic destruction, cultural disposition. We see this in other races as well as other ethnicities. What we also see that is passed down is resiliency as well. And so there's a connection between the trauma that one faces, but also the resiliency that a group has to build up in order to be able to live and breathe and be able to succeed. With that said, there are certain connections of whether we get to a place of resilience or whether we get to a place of dis-ease. And so when we look at something called the social determinants of health, those determinants are where you eat, live, play, and pray. And one of them is built environment. In that built environment is where you live, but also there's another social determinant around health and health access. Do you have access to a doctor? Do you have access to a mental health practitioner? Do you have access to family or friends who may be able to talk these things through you? So what is your social community context? If we have these things set up where we live in a built environment that's conducive to being healthy, it actually can alleviate some of the issues around intergenerational trauma. If we have access to mental health care, which is usually tied to possibly where you work, we're able to be able to work through these things with a practitioner. And if we also are a part of a community and have a social community context that is working for the betterment of your living, we can be able to build up this resiliency. But what if you do not have all of these things? Things like depression can happen. Things like panic and anxiety disorders can happen. Things like, well, what happened when I receive a microaggression or macroaggression when I'm at work from a person of dominant culture? How is my physical response? And we're starting to see now, and studies are starting to show that microaggressions and macroaggressions and what we'll just call racism in our workspace is actually affecting not only our mental health, but our physical health as well. So all of the things that are connected around the social determinants of health, we have to look into in order to make sure that we are in a space that's conducive for our best health. But on the flip side, we also had childhoods. And we're seeing now that adverse childhood experiences can also exacerbate traumas within people of African descent, Black folk. These adverse childhood experiences could be something that we don't even think about, like divorce. Is a family member incarcerated? Abuse, neglect, all of those things work together to re-traumatize us. Or on the flip side, if we have lives without some of those adverse childhood experiences, it also, again, builds up resilience within us. If I'm looking at these social determinants of health, one of the things that I said earlier was around health and healthcare and access to health and healthcare. But there's also a distrust within the healthcare system, and as it should be. I believe in one of the first diagnosis manuals for this country, there was actually a syndrome that said that a slave that ran away was having a psychotic break. There's a reason that we have issues with people of color, particularly Black people, going to see a doctor, or to not only just going to see a doctor, but also going to see a mental health practitioner who may or may not understand our lived experiences. All of these things work together to say whether or not we'll be able to work through our generational trauma, work around our generational trauma, or break down because of our generational trauma. Now, am I saying because you're a Black person, you're automatically going to have mental health issues because it's in your genes and it was passed down due to the effects of slavery? No. What I'm saying is that we're seeing a connection between your lived experience as a Black person and those experiences that might be adverse, connecting with the social determinants of health that could lead to different outcomes for different people. We're even seeing that your zip code can change your life expectancy. Just moving 20 minutes away in certain areas could mean the difference of a 20-year life expectancy change of you living 20 years longer or possibly dying 20 years younger just because of the spaces we were in. So what I would like us to do as an action step is to start reevaluating all of the pieces of those social determinants that we are a part of. your built environment, your health and healthcare, your social community context, your education, your economic stability, but not only just think about it for us on an individual level, but also thinking about how this affects the communities that we serve, and also lessening the adverse childhood experiences that those who are younger and our family members may be experiencing. And remember that though trauma can be passed down, resiliency is also passed down. And the fact that we come from a resilient people means a lot. There are access issues that many of us may face, but there are multiple resources out there. And many of those resources I actually have listed on my website, charlesdjackson.com, and also on my social media pages, which are at Diverse Charles on Twitter and Instagram. Thank you.
Hello and welcome. Can you imagine living in a household where schizophrenic outbursts, manic rage, and violent behavior were frequent? Your parents were devout Christians, and for them, the only solution for the ones perpetrating this conduct was to pray and or go to church. I'm Cynthia Mobley Howell, founder and CEO of How Well Are You? And I am your mental health advocate who's lending my voice to eradicate the stigma surrounding mental illness. One of my primary goals is to support bridging the gap between the faith based and mental health communities. You see, I'm one of four siblings who grew up in a household where all of my siblings, my brothers, were affected by a severe mental illness. Now, before anyone was aware that their behaviors were mainly caused by the onset of a mental health issue, I remember hearing my mama say things like, they need to pray or they need to go to church. And I would consider that to be a typical response, since in the Black community, our faith has always played a major role in supporting us, in getting us through tough times. However, in the case of my brothers, they needed more than prayer or church attendance. They needed professional mental health treatment. So here it is. Because of the stigma surrounding mental illness in the Black community, to include the faith based aspect, unfortunately, prompt treatment wasn't sought for my brothers. I believe the lack of early intervention impeded their abilities to successfully manage their illnesses. My brother's stories ended rather tragically, and I continue to mourn their chance to live ordinary, productive, and fulfilling lives. That said, I would like to speak to you today on the topic of, is faith by itself enough? A report compiled by Mental Health America in October 2022 reveals that 21% of adults are affected by a mental illness. Now, that's equivalent to over 50 million Americans. 16% of youth report suffering from at least one major depressive episode in the year prior to this report. More than 2.7 million youth are dealing with severe major depression. That same report reveals that 13.4% of the US population identifies as Black or African American, and of those, over 16% reported having a mental illness in the year preceding this report. Anxiety and Depression Association of America reports that over 80% of Black people in America identify as Christian, with many in that percentage attending Black churches. Today, I'm going to provide you with 3 tips on how we can make practical and effective use of our spirituality to support and promote mental wellness within the Black community. Number 1, we must educate our church leaders about mental health. Scripture tells us that my people are destroyed or they perish for lack of knowledge. So, can you type education in the chat? People who experience mental health concerns often turn first to their faith leader. Pastors are seen as the first responders or the gatekeepers when individuals and families face mental health and other challenges. Leaders should learn the basic signs of mental illness so they can respond appropriately to those who are struggling with their mental wellness. We must remind faith leaders that mental health conditions are just as real and common as physical health conditions. Again, they can't just be prayed or Bible studied away. If someone has a broken bone, they see an orthopedic doctor, right? If they're diagnosed with cancer, they would be treated by an oncologist. And if someone is experiencing a blood disease, they would probably see a hematologist. You get my point. Leaders must recognize when dealing with congregants who have mental health challenges what is beyond their scope and when to refer an individual to seek treatment with a mental health professional. So, number 1, church leaders need education. Number 2, the faith based community should seek opportunities to collaborate with and work together with community mental health providers. Type collaboration in the chat. You see, when these 2 powerful resources link up, they support the long term recovery of those living with a mental illness, which is essential. So, what does that look like? The faith community can partner with the mental health community and invite them to speak to their congregations about mental health. When scheduling health fairs, make sure mental health is included. Speak with the mental health community about knowing where to access resources. Trust me, if 1 in 5 US adults are living with a mental illness, they're present in your congregation. So be prepared to point them in the right direction when they come for help. And I said when, not if, because they will come. So the faith based and mental health community need collaboration. And lastly, number 3, conversate. Find ways to normalize the conversation in order to increase social support for those experiencing mental health symptoms. Can you type conversation in the chat? When we experienced the pandemic a little over 3 years ago, conversation became a bit more normalized, but we still have a very long way to go. Wouldn't you agree? We should talk openly about our own mental health struggles or those of our family members. I feel pretty safe speaking about my brother's mental illnesses. My oldest brother, who was bipolar, died by suicide at age 32. My middle brother, who's schizophrenic, has been missing for over 2 decades. And my youngest brother, who is also schizophrenic, has been institutionalized for 36 years. You heard me right, 36 long years. You see, when we speak openly about our own experiences. This lets those challenged with their mental health know that they are not alone. We want to encourage safe and supportive environments for people to openly talk about mental health and other related issues. And one way to do this is through support groups. And we should, by all means, provide these groups in-house as well as virtually. We want people to be able to participate in these groups. So, a significant start in bridging the gap between the faith-based and mental health communities is to promote education, collaboration, and communication. I'll say that again. Promote education, collaboration, and communication. In closing, let me leave you with something that I read from Daniel H. Gillison, Jr., the executive officer of NAMI. And I quote, "For too long, there has been a divide between faith and mental health, with mental illness being viewed as a moral or spiritual failing and spirituality being viewed as unscientific. We spent too much time in silos where instead we could be finding strength and healing through partnership. Faith and mental health are not antithetical to each other. In fact, they're complementary," end quote. So again, I ask the question, is faith by itself enough? My name is Cynthia Mobley Howell, founder and CEO of How Well Are You? And you can connect with me via my website at cynthiamobleyhowell.com, which connects to all of my social media platforms. And I leave you with my mantra as it relates to ending the stigma of mental illness. I'm not keeping quiet anymore. Peace and blessings.
Zoloft, Lexapro, Wellbutrin, Adderall, Trazodone, Prozac, Cymbalta, Celexa, Xanax, Concerta, Effixor, Clozapine, Lamiquel, Seroquel, Ativan, Captave, Elavil, Paxil, Vyvanse, Abilify, Remeron, Valium, Facoline, Triliptal. All of these are names of prescription medications that are used to treat mental illness, which include depression, anxiety, ADHD, panic disorder, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, OCD, binge eating disorder, and alcohol withdrawal. Hi, my name is Deborah D. Ford. I'm a PhD candidate in general psychology at Capella University. I'm also a mother of 2 young adults diagnosed with mental health illnesses, and I'm pleased to be part of the Black Mental Health Speakers Series. Medicine only works when you take it. There is stigma surrounding mental health, and it is pervasive in the Black community. Mentally ill persons cannot simply stop their medication when they feel better. It's needed for balancing the brain, and when the medication is interrupted, the balance ceases. So what is stigma? One definition of stigma is that it's a mark of disgrace associated with a particular circumstance, quality, or person. Merriam-Webster defines stigma as a set of negative and unfair beliefs that a society or group of people have about something. A second definition is that it's a mark of shame or discredit. It is a stain. Imagine, it is a stain on the individual to have a mental health challenge. So addressing mental health stigma in the Black community is something that needs to be examined. And so I'm going to briefly touch base on some of the factors that contribute to the stigma, and I want to try and address very briefly some ways to help break down the barriers to help seeking. So one of the first barriers, one of the first factors that lead to stigma is that it's considered a weakness. It's weak to need help for your mind. You should be able to suck it up. You should be able to function and just carry on. You are a wuss if you can't make it through life daily? Well, no one tells someone who has a physical condition that they are weak if their body can't process glucose, if their body cannot process stress and their diastolic and systolic numbers are high, which is hypertension. No one tells those individuals that they are weak for needing medication to maintain any physical ailment in the body. However, they somehow manage to disassociate the brain from the body. The brain is an organ within the body, and if it needs help with regulation, there should be no shame needed in helping it to function properly. The second factor, or the second stigma, which is heard quite often, is that the individual is lacking faith. They should simply be able to pray about it and work their way through it. Again, no one tells an individual, no one with common sense tells an individual, you don't need to take that medication for hypertension. You know, you might stroke out while you're following their negligent advice, but it makes you strong. No one tells an individual who is diabetic, no one with good sense, oh, you don't need to take that medication. You might go into a diabetic coma, or you might need an amputation down the line. But no one tells those individuals, just stop taking your medication and pray about it. You'll be fine, without another individual looking at them, pausing and being mindful of the fact that they are uninformed and ignorant. The same should be true for mental health illnesses and taking psychotropic medication. The third stigma, or the third factor, if you will, we have become accustomed and we recognize, we even understand and accept self-medicating. Self-medicating alcohol, self-medicating, we like weed. We just want to calm down. We recognize that. Well, guess what? There are some ways that people self-medicate that exacerbate the mental illness. And so you're doing yourself a disservice by attempting to self-medicate instead of getting a proper diagnosis to take care of yourself in the manner that is required. Again, the brain is an organ in the body. If it needs to be regulated in order for it to fire on all cylinders, for all the cogs and springs and neurons to work properly, then take the medication. I mentioned that I am a mother of 2 young adults who were diagnosed with mental illness. My son was diagnosed with ADHD. He was diagnosed with anxiety and depression. My daughter was diagnosed with anxiety and depression. Clearly, my son has a greater challenge. There's also an additional diagnosis, which he has not yet to accept. However, I told him, son, take the medication for what you do accept, so we can at least focus on that. And guess what? As a parent, I am an advocate for him taking his medication so he can function. I have to maintain the schedule as best as possible for his medication. When I see that he's taking the last of something, my immediate question is, when is your next psychiatric visit? Because they're the ones that prescribe the medication. And if it's not for another 3 weeks, well, you can't stop taking psychotropic medication like that. So I found a program, a program where you can purchase your medication online if you're being treated for mental illness, where they will fill the prescription for you. They are in contact with the clinicians just so that you don't have a lapse in your medication. And this is what I do as a mother, as an advocate of my young adult son who has mental illness, and sometimes because of his extreme ADHD, he doesn't even remember to make the doctor's visits. I am the advocate. I am supportive of his brain being regulated. My daughter, there was a time when she was taking medication. Unfortunately, she has chose to find the self-medicating method for dealing with her anxiety. I don't necessarily advocate that, but hers is not as extreme as my son's. Hers is manageable. But for the individual who finds himself in a state where their behavior is unmanageable and they are not functioning, and only you can determine that. Sometimes your family members can look at you and recognize you're not acting normally, you're acting odd. But when you start to recognize it and you are dismissive of it, you are doing yourself a disservice. The quality of your life should be paramount. And you should not be concerned with what it sounds like for you needing to take medication for you to be functional. I want my people to be well. I want them to function and have an enhanced quality of life. I don't want them to simply exist. If you need the medication so that you can have the full experience of the wonderfulness of what this life can order, what it can bring, by all means, take that medication. Let's remove the stigma. Do what you need to do to maintain your mental health, because your mind matters.
Hi, I'm Dr. Mishelle Rodriguez, and I'm excited to get to share with you today. I'm a trauma expert, psychologist, and I work with Black leaders and professionals to help them find strategies to make the impact that they want to, and also protect their well-being and their wholeness while they do it. So this talk today has a special place in my heart. We're going to be talking about decolonizing our excellence so that we can have the most success and wellness while we do it. First, I'm going to give you some definitions. We're going to talk about what does the harm look like that we're even trying to decolonize. And then we're going to talk about some strategies, so how we can help deal with it best and show up best. So what I want us to talk about is, first, what is decolonization? Decolonization is the process of undoing the harmful effects of colonization and the ongoing systems of oppression. And we were going to get in, as we talk, into some very specific ways in which this affects our success strategies. The overview, though, is that most of us, when we think about where we went to school, where we even thought of what we wanted to do for a living and how to do it, we probably become aware that the playbook for success, the field manual, the rule book, was built by white men, for white men, and didn't really think about our magic, how we do things, and especially not our health and our well-being while we did it. I want to first talk about white supremacy culture. And as we go through this talk, that's like a big topic. We're going to get really into the specifics of it, but let's define it really quick. Culture, first, is the ways of life for a group of people based on their values. So then white supremacy culture is the idolization of certain ways of being, and then them being spread out through systems as the way to be and pushed on people whether they serve them, fit them, or not. Some of these ways of being aren't inherently harmful, but when we don't choose them and they're just acting on us silently in the background, affecting how we show up, and when they're being upheld as the only way, and that every other way is inferior. So for example, like straight hair is good and professional and other ways aren't, it limits the ways that other people can really show up and be successful. There's so many of them, and the fact that it's culture makes it often hard to pick them out and see how they're affecting us. And so that's why we're going to spend some time doing that today. So we're going to talk about different aspects of white supremacy culture that negatively impact our success strategies and well-being. This is mostly built on the work of Tema Okun and then also Dr. Linda Myers. So one of the main problems is that white supremacy culture says there's only one way to do a thing. It's the only professional way, the only appropriate way, and every other way is less than. And so this gets us starting at looking at somebody else's how to do something instead of really dropping down into our own bodies and figuring out, what are my strengths? What ways feel right and work with my body and my nervous system and my ways of being to do the thing? I know the people that I serve. I know me and how I work best, and that should be my starting place. But instead, we're often second guessing, overthinking, doubting ourselves, dealing with imposter syndrome. And so if you notice that happening, it probably has to do with this part of white supremacy culture, at least a part of it. There's also an either or thinking. So there's a right way and a wrong way, and that's it. And in reality, we know there's a gazillion different ways to do a thing. There's lots of room for nuance and complexity. So the strategies we use to address this are slowing down, knowing that there's complexity, reimagining, listening to and unpacking what are we being told is the only way, and does it really work for us? And then getting really grounded in our own authentic strategies. So we want to know what our strengths are, what our values are, how they may be similar to most people in our career, and how they may be different. We're often being told, well, there's industry standards and there's common practices, and those things are true, but who made them? And do they have to be that way? So for example, there are times where we can push back. We can, litigate so that women can wear their hair however they want to show up in their workspaces. There are times where we may talk with other people who share identities and say, how do I work within this, but do it my way? And there are also times where we may not have the power to do it different, but we can at least not internalize that we are defective, that we are the problem. So we can question, we can say these things didn't fall from the sky. Like they can be remade, they can be reinvented, and they can fit the way that we work to it. If they say leadership can only be extroverted, don't feel less than because you're introverted. You can find your ways to do it. If you're neurodiverse or creative or more heart-centered than data-centered, if you don't want to code switch, all of these things can be a part of your secret sauce, and you want to ground yourself in you and then be really intentional about how you move instead of being only doing it the way that you're told it can be done. A big part that comes right after this is being separated from our bodies. So white supremacy culture says that our minds are better, superior to our body. Now, this disconnects us from our wisdom, our gut, our intuition, and it keeps us neglecting our bodies. Our bodies tell us the truth often about whether these systems really work for us or not. And so we want to, as a strategy, pause, get down in our bodies, be doing movement, yoga, breathing, also learning to really slow down and listen to our bodies and care for them instead of pushing them so far past their limits. Again, we're often told we can only be successful or take care of our bodies. And the reality is there's a lot of options for doing both, and we want to find them and fight for them and practice them. We want to develop realistic goals and timelines for ourselves. We want to coach ourselves in ways that say we can do these things. Let's figure out how. So another aspect of white supremacy culture that's very closely related to all of this is perfectionism. This, and I'll give you kind of a definition here, the tendency to demand of others or oneself an extremely high or even flawless level of performance in excess of what is required. So white supremacy culture really teaches us a lot that they're not good enough. It's not powerful enough. It's not successful enough. It's not big enough. And we have to be able to accept that on any given day, we have what we have and it's enough. And that we can work within that. We want to normalize that people have limits, flaws, make mistakes, and can still really excel because it's too much stress and pressure to put on a human being to be perfect. And that doesn't help our mental health as we go towards the things that we want. So as a strategy, we want to create relationships where it's safe to make mistakes, professional relationships where we can talk about those things. When we talk to ourselves, we want to be warm and supportive, even in the moments that are difficult. We want to have ways of bringing ourselves back and coaching ourselves through moments that are hard. Okay, I'm going to give you the last few here, and you're going to feel them probably as I say them. White supremacy culture has fear and urgency and scarcity built into it. So it encourages power hoarding and hyper competition. It says to you, you are only worth what you can amass. What you can amass is more important than your quality of life, your quality of relationships. And we know that that's not true and not going to lead to our ultimate success and feeling successful in our lives and whole in our lives. White supremacy culture says everything is urgent. There's not enough for everyone. So we've got to often stop and say, okay, even when I hear that, how does it affect my body? And what if that is really true? Everything is not urgent. We can slow down and prioritize. We've got to pause and go back to those values that we figured out were ours, and then figure out how do we live into them. We want to be interconnected with other people who share our same values so they can help remind us of what they can look like in these moments when all of that is coming at us fast and furious. White supremacy culture also says quantity over quality. Progress is always things being bigger and better and more. And that's not even true. Sometimes taking it slow, being consistent, and showing up with quality is actually where the success is. But it's easy to get thrown off that strategy when you're on Instagram and taking all these coaching courses and everybody is saying bigger, better, faster. So you want to set boundaries about even when people can access you. If everybody wants in your company is accessible every night, weekend, and vacation, you probably want to ask yourself, what are my degrees of freedom to do something different? Working more hours, seeing more clients, responding to emails faster does not always actually equal more success. And so you want to be able to unpack those things. And the last thing I'm going to touch on today is that white supremacy culture says individualism is the way to do things. And some people even call it rugged or feral individualism. That everything that I just said, do it all, do it perfect, bigger, better, faster, and do it by yourself. And we know that that does not lead to our success or our well-being. So the strategies here are to think about where you need support. Where do you need mentoring? Where can you join a mastermind group? Where can you outsource some things? Develop a village around your career, your business, your leadership. Share knowledge instead of having to reinvent the wheel. Let's keep working on and talking about and growing in these things together. Take care.
Greetings, God's ambassador. What an honor to be before you once again. It is such a pleasure to have an opportunity to be able to share and to be able to commune in the Word of God, to be able to commune in just the encouragement of knowing the fact that He that created us is able to keep us. We're talking today about mental health. The subtitle of that as well is the one who created us is able to keep us. Many are going through different challenges mentally and so many struggles. Sometimes it's hard to explain the private pain. And you never know. Sometimes you could be in the midst of many people, but all are dealing with different levels of struggles, different levels of trauma that may have come in their life. Now, May is a month which carries heavy burden. It carries a heavy weight, in meaning that we carry the weight of God in such a different way when you come to May. Now, why is that? Is because we're dealing with a month that we're recognizing and honoring those who have fought in battles, physical wars, mental wars, and as well as spiritual wars. There are principalities and rulers of darkness and forces of the enemy, sometime in the spirit realm, that many are fighting mentally. And then there's those that have gone through different things in life that may have caused certain cycles to happen in their mind. as I thought about the resources and just kind of gathering various information to kind of back up this time, I looked at the letters, and I looked at one of the book of the late Dr. Martin Luther King. And in the book he says that there are times when there are those who times are so hard that you're trying to escape from the pain that you're going through. And many use escape in different types of way. Now we can say that perhaps that's what the prophet Elijah did. He was trying to escape mentally, maybe some type of fantasy that's not really a reality that people are using and to escape what they're going through. But it becomes so thin and thin and thin to where you step into schizophrenia. Many are dealing with different mental challenges, and it really behooves us to really pay attention to those signs of things that are going on. I recall one of the years, one of the gentlemen, and I think of him often as a military wife, cooking for the soldiers, and even having a place where they can kind of come and say, hey, this is home to you, away from home, and being motherly to the soldiers and so forth and so on. Just giving counsel where counsel need to be. And I recall one gentleman that would come by, and we took a lot of the soldiers in as family. We said, these are our families too. And I remember the one gentleman, I saw him on the day before Thanksgiving, and this was back in the 80s. We were in Hawaii, and I saw him the day before, and he was on my mind so heavily. I kept saying, are you all right? Are you all right? Are you, this and that? And the next morning, we were waiting for him to come to the table for Thanksgiving, only to find out that he had jumped from the third floor. So these things are very serious. Ways of escape. And many people describe that in different ways, in different forms. The young lady in the Old Testament who was raped, the Bible says that she would take the ashes and try to hide under the ashes. People use different forms and different ways to try to escape from what they are going through. We as people, number one, we have to learn how to encourage ourselves. We have to learn how to remind ourselves that God made us perfect. We have to remind ourselves. We live in a time where it seems as if things sometimes seem to be so backwards. Our concern have become everything else but what's really important. We have truly, as the Bible said, left our first love. And there are some things in life that we really need to return to, some things that we really need to go back to. In the Old Testament, it says to return to the ancient path, those ways where God was, where his power was. Many people are seeking for healing. Many people are seeking for healing. And I just wanted to remind someone that in spite of what you've been through, in spite of what you're going through, in spite of what the challenges may be, in spite of what your past has, look, there's a way out, and the way is Jesus Christ. Many have found many other ways out of everything, but the only true way is Jesus Christ. And I'm telling you, there's no sorrow, there's no pain that heaven cannot heal. This is the God that we serve. Hold on to the one that can keep you. Run after the one that can hide you. And the only one that can do that is our Lord. Jesus, he died on the cross that we may have life and that we may have it more abundantly. Look, Paul said he was going through some stuff. Look, he was in ministry. Imagine having to do everything, and imagine having to look like a hero to everyone, but still you're having private pains. Paul was dealing with some struggles. He had been bit by a snake. Look, he was on an island. Went shipwrecked. And then the scripture says that his mind was dealing with two natures warring against one another. So just understand, look, we're in different times. Daniel describes it as the times have been manipulated and the laws have changed. These are different times that we're in. And look, we got to hold on to God like never before. There's help that's out there. Don't you be out there by yourself. Just know that he who has created you will never leave you nor forsake you. He'll keep you. He'll keep you. Now, I just pray and I ask God to keep you in this season and in these times. I have a book out, and that book is called Crossroads. Where do we go from here? You can find it on the Amazon. Be encouraged, people, and just know God did not create you for no particular reason. There was reason behind your creation. The one who created you will keep you.
Hello, my name is Dr. Monique Bruner, and I am with you from Miles of Success Consulting. And today I want to talk to you about embracing diversity, cultivating empathy and understanding for the LGBT community. Empathy is an essential component of diversity training, particularly when it comes to issues related to the LGBT community. By fostering a culture of empathy, we can change the discriminatory policies and procedures and prevent discrimination and harassment to the LGBT community. As I sit before you today to discuss this important topic, I need you to understand at the heart of building an inclusive and supportive community, you have to cultivate empathy. Empathy is very simple. It is the ability to understand and share the feelings of others, and it plays a crucial role in fostering understanding, acceptance, and respect. By cultivating empathy, we can create an environment where every individual, regardless of their sexual orientation or gender identity, feels valued and embraced. In the next few minutes, we will explore the challenges, a few challenges faced by the LGBT community, and discuss the power that empathy provides in bridging gaps, and discover some practical ways we can all contribute to a more inclusive society. Policies and procedures that prevent discrimination and harassment in the LGBT community are essential for creating safe and inclusive environments. These guidelines aim to ensure that each individual, regardless of their sexual orientation or gender identity, is treated with respect and dignity. And then here's a short explanation of a few key procedures and policies that should be at every community, every organization, every educational institution. You need a good non-discriminatory policy. Establish a clear policy that explicitly prohibits discrimination based on sexual orientation or gender identity. This policy should encompass all aspects of employment, housing, education, and public services, ensuring equal opportunities for everyone. Number 2, training and education. Conduct regular training sessions to educate employees, students, and community members about LGBT issues, promoting understanding and empathy. This training should focus on recognizing and challenging biases, providing guidance on inclusive language and behavior, and creating an environment where diversity is celebrated. Number 3, inclusive policies and benefits. Review policies to ensure they are inclusive and respectful of LGBT individuals. This can include recognizing same-sex partnerships, providing gender-neutral restroom options, and accommodating gender transition processes in workplace and educational institutions. Number 4, visibility and representation. Encourage visibility and representation of LGBT individuals in various roles and positions within the organization and community. This can help create a more inclusive culture and challenge any stereotypes that may be out there. By implementing these policies and procedures, we can work towards creating environments that are truly inclusive, where LGBT individuals are respected, protected, and empowered to thrive. When addressing members of the LGBT community, it is important to use inclusive and respectful language and behavior. Here are a few key guidelines. Number 1, you want to use personal pronouns. Respect individuals' gender identity by using their personal pronouns. If you are not sure, it is acceptable to politely ask which pronouns they prefer. For example, my pronouns are she, hers. Number 2, you want to avoid assumptions. Do not assume someone's sexual orientation or gender identity based on their appearance or stereotypes. Respect that everyone has the right to self-identify and disclose their personal information. So give them the respect that they deserve and allow them to personally identify how they feel that they are living at the time. Number 3, we want to use inclusive terminology. We want to use that inclusive language that acknowledges the diversity of the LGBT community. So let me give you 3 examples of outdated language and provide the new updated inclusive language. Outdated is homosexual. Inclusive is gay or lesbian. Okay? Outdated, transgendered or transvestite. Inclusive language, transgender or trans person. And then the last one that I wanted to give for you today, outdated, is sex change or sex change operation. Inclusive would be gender affirmation surgery or gender confirmation surgery. You got that? Okay. Number 4, we're going to respect privacy and confidentiality. Do not disclose someone's sexual orientation or gender identity without their explicit permission. Respect their privacy and treat their personal information confidentially. So unless that person has said, you can disclose what my sexuality is, or what my instance is, or my role in the LGBT community, don't say. Number 5, most importantly, you need to educate yourself. Take the initiative to educate yourself about LGBT issues and terminology. Understand the various identities within the LGBT community and the challenges that they may face. Number 6, you want to challenge stereotypes and biases. Be mindful of your own biases and challenge any stereotypes or assumptions you may hold. Treat each individual as unique and deserving of the respect, regardless of their sexual orientation or gender identity. This is very important. I want to thank you for listening to my talk. Again, my name is Dr. Monique Bruner, and I have over 20 years of experience, and I'm dedicated to helping those who are marginalized achieve their goals. I have expertise in diversity, equity, and inclusion, and educational leadership, as well as a passion for community causes that make me a valuable asset to the country. Through my work, I've empowered students, I support philanthropic endeavors, and cherishes my role as a wife and a mother. Again, my name is Dr. Monique Bruner, and I am committed to making a positive impact and shaping a brighter future for all. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. My name is Dr. Monique Bruner. You can connect with me on Facebook, again, Dr. Monique Bruner, or you can check out my website at www.milesofsuccess.org. Again, thank you so much for listening, and I appreciate you.
Hi, I'm Dr. Shine, the LPC, and that stands for Licensed Professional Counselor. I am also a mental wellness advocate, as well as a licensed professional counselor, and I have studied African American women and have my PhD in psychology. What I wanted to talk to you about today is Mama Didn't Know, being mindful of stressful behaviors. Being a strong Black woman is a sense of pride for many Black women in the culture. The question is, where did it start? What does it really mean to be strong? And what is the cost that you pay for being seen as a pillar of strength? As a mental wellness advocate and a licensed therapist, I want to start by breaking down mental health, mental illness, and mental wellness. Mental health is the thinking and feeling of the inner consciousness that produces behavior. This is also known as your psychological and emotional well-being. Mental illness is the disorder or disease that has interrupted or disrupted or disturbed cognitive interpretations or emotional regulation abilities that often lead to behaviors that are seen as abnormal or outside of the general norm. Mental wellness is the balance of the 8 dimensions that the Department of Health and Human Services say that are necessary to have wellness. And so this is really about your purpose and your outlook towards the future. Those 8 dimensions include emotional regulation, which is your ability to cope and be able to express your emotions in relationships, your environment where you live and your surroundings and feeling good and safe in your environment, financial satisfaction, including the current status as well as your future status. Intellectual health, the ability to recognize, to be able to create and build skills and expand on your knowledge. Occupational health, finding personal satisfaction and enrichment in the job that you do. Physical health, which is your body. Social health is that sense of connectedness and belongingness and having a support system. And the spiritual health, which again is that sense of purpose and recognizing the meaning of life or searching for that meaning of life. And so even when you think about those 8 dimensions alone for African Americans, that means something a little bit different, because when you talk about being safe in the environment or occupational health, things like that, we weren't given the same space as others to achieve those things. But now we know and have the opportunity to do better. So knowing that your mental health impacts your physical body, your emotional insight, and your sense of connections, it is not surprising who you have around you can influence your stress levels. Black women have been socialized to work, produce, take care of others. Don't feel, but create, generate, build, construct, do something. And so when you think about our mothers and our mothers' mothers, our mothers took care of others. Often she was carrying or caring for someone and putting her needs last. The socialization of this country for Black women as a people, we had come to work. When you think of us as a whole, we had not been given a space to rest. And so what happens when the mind does not rest? Well, The National Institute of Mental Health says 1 out of 5 people will have a mental health issue in their lifetime. Our mother and grandmother, often seen as the matriarch in most families, was probably working with high stress. Functioning with high stress. Dr. Cheryl Woods Giscombe talks about network stress. Network stress is where the African American woman ignores her own personal hormonal stress triggers, but relates to family, friends, and loved ones, often seeing their needs and trying to attend to their needs. In her article, Whose Stress is Making Me Sick? Network Stress and the Emotional Distress in African American Women, she details that stress, including racism and discrimination, has been identified as one of the determining factors to impact the health disparities you see with Black women statistically. She goes on to talk about how we respond to life stressors. Often events that seem bothersome and draining are looked at as regular occurrences. We've seen our mothers do it and our grandmothers do it, our aunts, our sisters, and friends. We tap into that self-reliance, into that obstinate strength, being the strong Black woman. Now, I will not tell you to take off your cape, but I will ask if you can hang up your cape every now and again. I like to share with women the 80-20 rule. 20% is saved for things that you cannot control, how life will hand you things that you do not deserve or did not want. But 80% of the time should be for flexibility, should be for that self-preservation, should be spaces for vulnerability. Yes, knowing what you need, being able to feel how you need to feel, and asking for what you need and going after what you need. So how do you do that? You allow yourself to have self-awareness, to understand your emotions, to feel your emotions. So if you need to cry, you cry. If you need to say no, you say no. Sometimes you may need to take some deep breaths, inhaling, taking in good air, and holding for a few seconds. You gotta hold because that's where the magic happens. And then release, letting out the emotions that have been pent up that sometimes you cannot share. Also, bring gratitude into your life, starting your day with 3 or 4 things that you are grateful for. If you find that you have trouble with 1 or 2 of these things, then work with a professional. There are people out there who look like you who want to help you. Mama didn't know, but now you do. Thanks for listening.
Hello, my name is Sharita Shelton Settles, aka Relatable Rita. I am a licensed professional counselor in the state of Georgia. And today I want to talk to you about the role that race plays in overall mental health. So I want to talk about melanin and mental health, especially in the African American community. I would like to share a poem that kind of highlights some of the disparities and differences that there are when it comes to us and when it comes to mental health. So here we go. Historically, Black people don't go to therapy. For so many reasons, there was no safe space. Allowing ourselves to feel our emotions wasn't the case. We looked to God or our own vices for advice. We internalized our trauma we inherited from Big Mama. Black people don't go to therapy. That wasn't something we could financially afford, even though as a people it's hard to get on one accord. Ancestors saying we should overcome, but it's a lot of stuff to overcome where I'm from. Microaggressions in the workplace to unfair sentences in our prison case. Representation matters when it comes to what we see. Normalizing getting help from someone that looks like me. Brown skin, big lips, big hair, big energy, inner city history. Black people don't go to therapy. That's for crazy people, and we don't spread our business. or like being made to feel less than equal? How can I heal from all these generational feelings of inadequacy if Black people never go to therapy? Thank you. I just wanted to talk to you today about some of the reasons that we have not historically, as a culture, gone to therapy. And I touched on a few of those in the poem. First and foremost, we did not always have access to what we need in order to get help. As far as it being affordable, therapy was not something that we could really always afford. But when it comes to also representation, that is a huge piece. I have a few statistics to talk about. By the numbers, 88% of psychologists are white, while less than 2% of psychologists are Black. So when we are looking for somebody to really recognize and understand our life experiences, that's not the case when we are seeing someone who may not have those same shared experiences that we have. 1 in 3 Black adults with mental illness receive treatment. The majority do not care. Despite the large need, we have a tendency to feel like we can handle things on our own, or that we can pray about those things and we can look to other people or talk to our friends or talk to our family. But the reality is, as we look at the increase, the 78% is the increase in the amount of suicide rates from 2000 to 2020. 78%. That is absolutely startling when we think about how many of our people we are losing to suicide, because in our community, mental health is not something that is at the forefront. It is slowly becoming something that is more accessible and something that is highlighted because we all have challenges. A lot of times we may not have jobs that have healthcare insurance. That is another barrier that we have in terms of being able to seek out assistance from somebody that looks like us. The number of Black people in the U.S. that report having mental illness in the past year alone is 7 million. So when we think about all of the things that we have gone through in our culture historically, when we look at the slavery that we've gone through, when we look at the systemic racism that has occurred and the impact that that has played on how we view ourselves, and the lack of trust that we have not only in the mental health system, but the medical system. When we look at Tuskegee Airmen or other things that they tested on us, our people, it gives us a mistrust of the institution overall. So when it's time for us to say, hey, I have an issue that I may not be able to overcome on my own, and I may need somebody to assist me with that, it's a very difficult thing for us to be able to admit. We weren't able to put names to diagnosis for a very long time, right? When we think about our people in our community, it's a lot of, well, that person is just not right, or they had a nervous breakdown, or their nerves are bad, right? When we're talking about things that are actually anxiety, or we're talking about things that may have been postpartum depression, or PTSD when we were coming back from the military, or all of the things that we experienced when we talk about during the civil rights movement and Jim Crow, and how they dismantled a lot of the organizations that were put in place to help us with our mental health. We just did not have the access anymore once a lot of those programs had became dismantled. We are just less likely to seek out mental health because we may not always be able to recognize that it is bigger than ourselves. We are also more likely to terminate services prematurely. If we feel like, I went to see a therapist, that didn't work for me. I tried it one time, I had one session, and I didn't really connect with that person, then we're not trusting of the system. And so we're not really looking to experience that again. We have to talk about the fact that we do not tend to like to spread our business. We keep what happens in our house in our house. So when it comes to speaking to somebody that is outside of our community and talking to them about the things that are going on with us, that feels very foreign. Not only does it feel foreign, it feels vulnerable. And when we feel vulnerable, we feel uncomfortable. And when something makes us feel uncomfortable, we're less likely to do it. Why would we want to be putting our business out there if we don't think that that person can legitimately help us? But we've seen in recent years the importance of being able to have the freedom of someone to talk to that is not your mother or your father or your sister or your friend, because a lot of times within those relationships, we have created some sort of dynamic. We have a role that we play in those relationships. The strong Black woman, the strong Black man, or we don't tell our business. And so we're not able to really have those difficult conversations when it comes to those people, because we don't want them to see us as weak. We don't want them to see us as anything other than strong, right? We don't get depressed. God is able. We can pray our way out of it. We can, nobody can tell me I'm crazy. I already know what's going on with me and God is going to fix me. But we know that we can pray and we can still need therapy, just like we can pray and still need a doctor. A lot of times we feel like we've survived so much adversity and there's been so many things that we've overcome from our past that this seems small to just be depressed, because we have a job, we have a nice house, we have whatever it is that society says that we're supposed to have, but we don't have peace. We are still dealing with a lot of that trauma that we internalized from Big Mama, as I stated in my poem. A lot of those things that are passed down from generation to generation, not just generational curses, but generational conditioning. So we have to decide to do something different at this point if we're going to be having melanin in mental health. Thank you. Have a great day. I do have a couple of other resources that I want to give you. Of course, therapy for Black girls, clinicians of color, therapy for Black men, for those of you that are looking for a therapist at this time. You can also follow me at Relatable Rita on all platforms, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. I am a licensed professional counselor, as I stated, and I am looking forward to us changing the narrative of what it looks like for Black people.
Hello, and welcome to the Balancing Act, where we will be talking about strategies to decrease your stress and protect your mental health. I am Tamika Johnson, and as an attorney, author, entrepreneur, wife, mother, daughter, friend, and more, I am all too familiar with how quickly our roles and responsibilities consume our lives and affect our mental health in ways that we don't understand or want them to. Before we talk about those strategies, though, first and foremost, it's important to acknowledge that there will always be storms and disruptions in our lives, both personally and professionally. With that being the case, maintaining your mental health and finding peace, admittedly, is not always easy, but it is absolutely necessary for long-term success and longevity overall. Now, I know I look like I have it all together, but there have been times in the past that mental health-wise, I was really struggling. Truth be told, many of us Black professionals, especially those of us who are successful or high achievers, we have damn near perfected projecting being poised and being confident and being strong and presenting that image to the world and even to those closest to us. But inside, we can also be overwhelmed and stressed and depressed and sad and lonely. I have personally been there on more than one occasion, and while I was there, no one even suspected that I was so stressed out and depressed that my hair was coming out, I couldn't sleep, my back hurt all the time, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. But at the same time, I was wearing this beautiful Superwoman cape, getting things done left and right like I always do, but I was just going through the motions. Ironically, though, I also represented mental health patients for 10 years as an attorney. And I have been to enough mental facilities and been in contact with countless patients to know that it does not matter how many degrees you have, how successful you are, how much money you have. We are all subject to burnout and breakdowns. So I really encourage you to implement the work-life balance strategies that I'll be sharing with you shortly, because they will simultaneously help you decrease your daily stress, promote self-care, help you achieve peace, and allow you to continue to perform optimally at work, in your business, and in your relationships, whether you're single or married, and whether you have children or trying to have children. Now, putting race aside for the moment, living in this country is taking an emotional toll on many of us. Things like, will our child's school be the latest one on the news because of a senseless act of gun violence? Will political bullies continue to try to strip minorities, women, or gays of another right or freedoms that we have all been afforded and accustomed to for all or most of our lives? Will a routine traffic stop while driving to meet a client end tragically? Will inflation, food, property taxes, insurance, interest rates, consumer goods, will any of those things go back down to reasonable rates? Probably not, but those are still things that plague us on a daily basis. Now, as a Black entrepreneur and professional, we have additional challenges. We have to perform at a higher level at work and in business than our counterparts, and we are constantly faced with racism and discrimination. For entrepreneurs specifically, access to capital, funding, resources, support, corporate sponsors, and contracts can also be challenging to find and secure. All these things impact us emotionally, mentally, and physically, and can and will take a toll on us. So let's talk about how to balance all this out, right? I am going to share with you 5 tips and strategies to find and maintain a healthy work-life balance so as to avoid burnout and to continue to kill it as a Black entrepreneur and professional. Number 1, we should all have scheduled weekly downtime. Now, this can be a day, it could be half a day, it could be several hours, or it could be an hour. Whatever it is, though, do it weekly at the same time if possible and be consistent. Once you find out what that time is, communicate it to your coworkers, your bosses, your family, your spouses, your children, your friends. Let everyone know. Why is communicating your downtime to others important? Because it is the only way that they will respect it. We are often the go-to person in other people's lives. And they know that you will tend to their needs and requests at a drop of a dime or as soon as possible at your expense. But if you make it clear that let's say every Wednesday from 6 to 8 p.m. that you're unavailable, people will begin to respect that and know that you won't answer their phone calls, you won't read or respond to their emails, and you won't text them back. So for me, I have little ones. I have a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old, so I don't have a lot of downtime. But early Sunday mornings, and I mean like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, I go to my room. I have a private room in my house, and I lock the door. When my sons wake up in the morning, early on Sunday morning, they come to my room and they repeatedly knock on the door 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes. I don't say anything, and I'll open the door. Eventually, they get it, and they go to my husband. And that's the morning that he feeds them and he watches them while I just rest. And that actually brings me to another point. That weekly downtime should be just that. No household chores or running errands. Just relax. Read a book, take a leisurely walk, take a bath, sit outside, drink a cup of tea or coffee, meditate, or just sleep. Whatever it is, let it be low energy and a time of quiet, whether it's done in or outside the home. Number 2, take a cell phone break. You may not want to hear it. We need a break. Let me ask you this. When you go out to a restaurant, how many people are truly engaging with one another in their party without looking at their cell phone? And how many are on their cell phones? Technology has made us disconnected. And for many of us, as much as we don't want to admit it, prisoners of our phones. So for the love of God and all creation, take a daily break from your phone for at least an hour while you're awake. No calls, no texting, no emails, no social media, no taking pictures, no working. For example, again, 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock in the evening. Continue whatever it is that you are doing, but do it without the phone. And again, no, a break from the phone while you're asleep does not count. So why is a cell phone break important? Because we are subject to massive amounts of information in short periods of time from our phones. negative news from social media, articles, wherever it is. We go from one subject, article, or post to the next, and our brains haven't even fully processed the first thing that we saw or read. We are in mental overload, and anxiety starts to kick in over time. So do yourself a favor, take a cell phone break, go play with your kids or your significant other, or the alternative, go out and about to potentially meet a significant other. Just be more engaged in life and away from your phone. Number 3, limit the direct access that people have to you. If you're an entrepreneur, to the best of your ability, require clients and customers to schedule both calls and meetings with you in advance. This gives you greater control of your work schedule and allows you to have longer uninterrupted time to work on your business, which is something that we all need. If you work in corporate America or for another company, do the same with your coworkers and employees and corporate clients as well. Requiring anyone that has any business-related matter or question and having them schedule that has been a lifesaver for me. I even have a date during the week where I don't schedule any work-related calls or meetings. I personally use Calendly, but there are plenty of other scheduling apps out there, so just choose the one that works best for you. Number 4, engage in hobbies and extracurricular activities, especially you ladies. Join a group, team, or club around the things you truly enjoy. Even if it's a solo activity like reading, join a book club so you not only get the interaction with like-minded people, but it makes you more likely to continually engage in that activity. Accountability works in all areas of our lives. Now, running out of time, so number 5, find a good therapist. They're not just for when things are going bad. It's for emotional maintenance. When things are going good, just go once a month or maybe once a quarter. But when things get challenging, it's great to already have a professional that you're comfortable with and they're already familiar with you, making it that much easier to navigate stressful times. Plus, trust me, finding a good therapist or counselor can take some time. And trying to find one during a period of crisis will only frustrate you, causing you to abandon all efforts to even find someone when you actually need them the most. Now, there are plenty of other strategies and tips, but these are just a few to help you achieve and maintain a healthy work-life balance. But these will definitely get you on your way. Remember, life will constantly throw you curveballs and losses. There will be unexpected deaths, divorces, breakups, children, health issues, and all those other life things that will negatively affect your mental health. But being proactive and prioritizing you decreases burnout and stress and helps you to protect your mental health. For additional work-life balance tips, strategies, and resources, feel free to visit my website at TamikaMichelleJohnson.com. You can reach out to me there. Thank you and have a great day.
All right, and there you have it. Thank you so much again for joining us for this session of the Black Mental Health Speaker Series. Now, remember, this is just one session of our 6-part series, so be sure to tap in for all the remaining sessions. To make it easy, you can just subscribe to the Black Speakers Network channel on YouTube. Be sure to hit that notification bell and be the first to know when future sessions are shared. I think it's safe to agree that the insights, experiences, and expertise shared today by our speakers in the mental health space have been nothing short of enlightening. So I want to thank all of our speakers once again. As we close for now, remember that the conversation doesn't have to end here. We encourage you to take these conversations, these thoughts, these ideas, go back into your communities, into your companies, and continue the conversation. As you have heard earlier, the speaker series just represents a small fraction of the wealth and the opportunities right here at Black Speakers Network. And so if you are a current or aspiring professional speaker and you're looking for your next stage, look no further. I invite you to join the Black Speakers Network community. You can get more information at blackspeakersnetwork.com/join. Now, if you are a meeting planner, you're a conference organizer, you have an event coming up and you're looking for the perfect speaker to impact your audience, again, look no further. We would love to connect you. You could browse our online directory of speakers right now at blackspeakersnetwork.com, or you can submit a speaker request and we will make sure you are covered for your next event. That's live or virtual, or in person or virtual. But that is it. Goodbye for now. And thank you once again for joining the Black Mental Health Speaker